Imagine a world fractured, a city bisected by an invisible line, yet a chasm of ideology. Berlin, 1950s. The Cold War simmered, a silent, deadly battle fought in the shadows, not with bullets, but with secrets. Now picture an audacious plan, so incredible, so impossibly daring, it seems ripped from the pages of a spy novel. A plan to burrow deep beneath enemy lines, to listen in on their most guarded whispers, to steal the very air of their conversations. This wasn't fiction. This was Operation Regal. Beneath the nascent concrete of the Berlin Wall, before its infamous rise, a different kind of wall was being breached, an impenetrable digital barrier. The ultimate prize, the unfiltered stream of Soviet and East German communications, diplomatic cables, military strategies, the mundane chatter of intelligence operatives, all flowing through underground lines. And where there were lines, there was a vulnerability, a hairline fracture in the Iron Curtain. American and British intelligence saw this fracture not as an obstacle, but as an invitation to descend into the earth, to dig blindly, quietly, under the very feet of their adversaries, to construct a monument to espionage, a secret artery pumping vital intelligence directly into the heart of the West. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a clandestine project involving hundreds of personnel, thousands of tons of excavated earth, and the constant, chilling dread of discovery. Every shovelful, every weld, every moment of silence in the cold, damp earth was a whisper against the storm of the Cold War, a whisper that, if heard by the wrong ears, could ignite an international inferno. From May 1955 to April 1956, this impossible dream became a subterranean reality. Declassified NSA documents now pull back the veil on this incredible feat of engineering and espionage. They reveal not just the mechanics of the tunnel, but the strategic chess game being played out on a global scale. The intercepts, the counterintelligence, the sheer audacity of tunneling beneath a superpower. It was a feat of human ingenuity, driven by paranoia and the desperate need to understand the enemy. But what happens when the enemy discovers your secret? What happens when your carefully constructed world beneath the ground collapses? And more profoundly, what other incredible secrets did the Cold War bury, only to be unearthed decades later? Secrets that challenge our understanding of integrity, morality, and the price of national security? This is just one story from a forgotten war, a war of shadows, a war fought not just underground, but also in the ethical twilight zones of human history. Prepare to descend. The truth is far stranger and far more unsettling than anything you've ever imagined. To understand the daring gamble of the Berlin Tunnel, we must first grasp the precarious geography of the Cold War. Germany, once the heart of a continent-wide conflict, was now its primary fault line. Defeated, dismembered, it became a microcosm of the emerging global struggle. The victorious allies, bound by wartime necessity, quickly found their grand alliance fracturing. East versus West, communism versus capitalism, two diametrically opposed ideologies squaring off across the ravaged landscape of Europe. In 1949, this division solidified into two distinct nations, the Federal Republic of Germany in the West, democratic and capitalist, and the German Democratic Republic in the East, a Soviet satellite state. But the beating, symbolic heart of this division lay in Berlin. A city utterly demolished, then painstakingly rebuilt, it remained a four-power occupation zone deep within Soviet-controlled East Germany. Imagine an island of Western democracy, a beacon of capitalist ambition, surrounded entirely by the iron fist of communism. This was West Berlin. It was a strategic anomaly, a constant thorn in the side of the Soviets, a magnet for refugees, and, crucially, a nerve center for intelligence operations. The Soviets viewed West Berlin as a capitalist cancer, an open wound allowing spies and saboteurs to infiltrate the East. For the West, it was an indispensable listening post, a window into the opaque world behind the Iron Curtain. Every street corner, every cafe, every official building held the potential for espionage. The division wasn't just political, it was profoundly personal. Families were split, friendships strained, daily life dictated by checkpoints and competing ideologies. The air was thick with suspicion, punctuated by moments of desperate defiance or quiet resignation. This environment, charged with tension and uncertainty, bred a desperate hunger for information. The West needed to know what the Soviets were planning, their military deployments, their economic strategies, their political machinations. The Iron Curtain was not merely a metaphor, it was a concrete, tangible barrier that stifled communication and cloaked intentions. Intelligence agencies, particularly the CIA and MI6, faced an immense challenge. How do you gather reliable intelligence from an adversary determined to conceal every move? Traditional human intelligence, though vital, was slow and dangerous. Aerial reconnaissance had its limits. The sheer volume and speed of modern communications demanded a more direct, more invasive approach. The very infrastructure of Soviet power, their telephone lines, their telex cables, became the ultimate target. These were the arteries of their command and control, carrying the lifeblood of their operations. If the West could tap into these arteries, they could bypass the layers of secrecy, listen in real time, and gain an unparalleled advantage. Berlin, with its unique geographical predicament, offered a tantalizing, albeit terrifying opportunity. The prize was immense, the risks unimaginable. But in the shadowboxing of the Cold War, the unthinkable often became the imperative. The stage was set for a daring venture, one that would redefine the boundaries of clandestine warfare, all beneath the very ground they walked on. The year is 1953. The dust of World War II has settled, but the chill of the Cold War is already biting deep. American and British intelligence agencies, the CIA and MI6, find themselves increasingly frustrated by the impenetrable veil surrounding Soviet operations in East Germany. The lack of reliable, real-time intelligence was a critical vulnerability. It was in this atmosphere of strategic desperation that the audacious concept of the Berlin Tunnel, codenamed Operation REGAL by the British and Operation Gold by the Americans, began to germinate. The genesis of the idea is often credited to George Blake, an MI6 officer, though ironically a Soviet double agent, a fact that would only come to light much later, adding another layer of treachery to an already complex narrative. The initial proposal was breathtaking in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Instead of trying to recruit individual agents or decipher coded radio signals, why not go directly to the source? Why not tap the physical communication lines that carried the lifeblood of Soviet and East German intelligence operations? Specifically, intelligence identified 3 key cable bundles running underground near the border in East Berlin's Alt-Glienicke district. These cables, buried just a few feet beneath the surface, were known to carry a vast array of vital communications. The telephone lines of the Soviet military headquarters in Zossen, critical lines to Soviet intelligence services, KGB and GRU, and the communication network for East German security forces. Tapping these lines would be like plugging directly into the brainstem of the enemy. The scale of the proposed operation was unprecedented. It wasn't a small infiltration, it was an industrial-scale espionage project. The plan required digging a tunnel approximately 450 meters, nearly a third of a mile, from the American sector of West Berlin, under a heavily guarded highway, through treacherous soil, and directly into the heart of East German territory. The entrance would be hidden within a CIA-constructed warehouse on Teufelsee Chaussee, a seemingly innocuous building disguising a portal to a secret war. The risks were monumental. Detection during construction could lead to a diplomatic crisis of unparalleled magnitude, potentially sparking a military confrontation. A tunnel collapse could bury workers alive. The noise and vibration of excavation could be picked up by Soviet sensors. The sheer volume of excavated earth, thousands of tons of sand and clay, needed to be discreetly removed and dispersed without arousing suspicion in a densely populated city. Furthermore, the technical challenge of successfully tapping multiple high-capacity cables without causing detectable interference was immense. Yet, the potential rewards outweighed these terrifying risks. Unfettered access to Soviet communications would provide a strategic advantage beyond measure. It would allow the West to anticipate moves, understand intentions, and perhaps even preempt aggression. The decision was made. The Anglo-American alliance, despite its internal tension, committed to this audacious venture. The planning moved from theoretical diagrams to concrete engineering blueprints. Teams of experts, from structural engineers to communication specialists, were assembled in utmost secrecy. The Cold War, it was decided, would now be fought beneath the very ground, in the silent, suffocating darkness, with shovels and wiretaps as the instruments of war. The stage was now set for the ultimate clandestine construction project. With the strategic decision made, the impossible task of building the Berlin Tunnel commenced. This was not merely digging a hole, it was constructing a sophisticated subterranean espionage facility under the watchful eye of a hostile superpower. The chosen entry point, a seemingly ordinary warehouse in West Berlin, was codenamed Stone House. Beneath its unassuming exterior, a vertical shaft descended 30 feet, becoming the clandestine gateway to Operation Regal. From this shaft, the horizontal tunnel began its arduous journey east, burrowing 450 meters, almost 1,500 feet, into East German territory. The engineering challenges were staggering. The ground beneath Berlin was a complex mix of sand, clay, and treacherous groundwater. Digging had to be done in absolute silence, a near impossible feat given the scope of the project. Conventional heavy machinery was out of the question. Instead, teams of specialized British Royal Engineers and American civilians, all sworn to secrecy, worked by hand, often in shifts in claustrophobic oxygen-depleted conditions. The excavated earth, estimated to be over 3,000 tons, presented its own logistical nightmare. It couldn't simply be piled up outside Stone House. Trucks, disguised as construction vehicles, spirited away the soil under the cloak of night, dispersing it across various locations in West Berlin, including a U.S. airbase and a garden nursery, blending it seamlessly into the urban landscape. Inside the tunnel, conditions were brutal. Workers battled constant dampness, the ever-present threat of collapse, and the psychological toll of perpetual darkness and secrecy. Every few meters, steel rings and wooden planks were installed to support the walls and ceiling, transforming a raw hole into a stable passageway. Ventilation systems were critical, not only to provide breathable air, but also to prevent the buildup of dangerous gases and to mask the presence of human activity. One of the most ingenious aspects was the construction of a false front building directly above the target cable bundle on the East German side. This small shed-like structure, built by the Soviets themselves to cover their cables, provided a perfect unwitting cover. The tunnel was designed to break out directly beneath this shed, allowing operatives to work undisturbed, shielded from aerial and ground surveillance. The final 30 meters of the tunnel, directly beneath the East German border and leading to the cable chamber, was constructed with even greater meticulousness. This section, the breakout chamber, was a marvel of covert engineering. It was a reinforced, soundproofed space meticulously designed to house the delicate tapping equipment without any sound or vibration reaching the surface. The entire operation was a race against time and an invisible enemy. Every creak, every tremor, every faint sound could spell disaster. The threat of discovery was omnipresent, not just from Soviet patrols, but also from unexpected geological shifts, or, as fate would later reveal, from within their own ranks. The tunnel itself became a monument to human endurance and clandestine ambition, a physical manifestation of the Cold War's desperate struggle for information. It wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a lifeline, a conduit for secrets, a silent assertion of Western determination to pierce the Iron Curtain, no matter the cost, in sweat, danger, and moral compromise. The stage was set, the tunnel was complete, and the listening began. With the last shovelful of earth removed and the final timber supports secured, Operation Regal entered its critical phase, the harvest. Deep beneath the border, in the specially constructed breakout chamber, the true purpose of the tunnel was realized. Technicians, working in shifts, carefully drilled into the concrete conduits housing the 3 vital cable bundles. With painstaking precision, they attached sophisticated tapping devices to the individual wires, ensuring that their presence remained undetectable, causing no discernible interference to the Soviet and East German communication flow. The sheer volume of information that suddenly flooded into the listening post was overwhelming. The cables carried a vast array of communications, from high-level Soviet military discussions regarding troop movements and equipment deployments to East German intelligence reports on Western activities. Telephone conversations, telex messages, and teleprinter traffic from the Soviet High Command in Zasen, the group of Soviet forces in Germany, GSFG, the East German Army, NVA, and various intelligence and security services, KGB, GRU, Stasi, were now flowing directly into Western hands. The listening post became a beehive of activity. Specialists fluent in Russian and German worked tirelessly, transcribing, translating, and analyzing the raw intercepts. Reel-to-reel tape recorders captured every nuance, every inflection, every coded burst. The information gathered was a goldmine. It provided unprecedented insights into Soviet military capabilities and intentions. Western intelligence learned about the precise locations of Soviet regiments, their force strengths, their supply routes, and their strategic doctrines. They gained invaluable intelligence on Soviet air defense networks, nuclear capabilities in Eastern Europe, and the readiness of their forces. Beyond military intelligence, the intercepts offered a window into the political and economic life of East Germany and its Soviet overlords. Western analysts could discern internal political struggles within the GDR, economic weaknesses, and the effectiveness of Soviet control. They even intercepted mundane administrative chatter, which, when pieced together, painted a comprehensive picture of the Soviet bloc's inner workings. The intelligence was so rich and detailed that it had to be carefully filtered and compartmentalized. To reveal the true source, a tunnel, would be to compromise the entire operation. So, the intercepts were often attributed to other, more conventional sources, such as human agents or radio intercepts, to maintain the fiction. The value of this intelligence cannot be overstated. It allowed Western policymakers and military strategists to make more informed decisions during a period of intense uncertainty and paranoia. It helped to counter Soviet disinformation campaigns, provided early warnings of potential aggression, and shaped Western understanding of the true nature of the Soviet threat. For over a year, from May 1955 to April 1956, Operation REGAL quietly provided an unparalleled stream of strategic intelligence. It was a period of immense triumph for clandestine warfare, a testament to the ingenuity and daring of those who fought the Cold War in the shadows. But, as with all secrets, especially those buried so deep, the question was not if it would be discovered, but when, and who, if anyone, already knew.
For nearly 11 months, Operation REGAL operated in profound secrecy, a silent, subterranean triumph for Western intelligence. But all secrets, especially those of such colossal scale, carry an expiry date. On April 22, 1956, that date arrived. Soviet military engineers, conducting routine cable maintenance in Alt-Glienicke, East Berlin, discovered the illicit connection. The initial details are still debated, but the widely accepted narrative suggests the discovery was accidental, though perhaps not entirely unforeseen by all parties. According to declassified NSA documents, the Soviets found an unusually well-constructed conduit leading away from their existing cable bundle. Following it, they uncovered the Western intelligence tunnel, a testament to its engineering quality even in discovery. The reaction from the East was immediate and explosive. On April 22, 1956, Soviet and East German officials unveiled the spy tunnel to the world's press in a meticulously orchestrated propaganda spectacle. Cameras flashed, microphones bristled, as triumphant Soviet generals led bewildered Western journalists through the damp, narrow passageway, pointing accusingly at the sophisticated tapping equipment. The Soviets were quick to denounce the operation as an act of banditry and aggressive espionage by the American and British imperialists, a flagrant violation of international law and a provocation threatening global peace. The discovery was a massive propaganda coup for the Eastern Bloc. It allowed them to portray the West as untrustworthy, aggressive, and disrespectful of national sovereignty. State-controlled newspapers and radio broadcasts in East Germany and the Soviet Union went into overdrive, painting lurid pictures of Western spies lurking beneath their feet, attempting to undermine their socialist paradise. For the United States and Britain, the public revelation was a moment of acute embarrassment. Initially, both governments issued carefully worded denials, claiming ignorance of the operation. However, the irrefutable evidence presented by the Soviets, the tunnel itself, complete with American and British equipment, made sustained denial impossible. Eventually, they shifted to downplaying the significance of the intercepts, portraying the operation as a minor intelligence-gathering effort. Behind the scenes, however, the mood was one of complex resignation. While publicly humiliated, Western intelligence agencies knew they had achieved their objectives. The tunnel had delivered an unparalleled stream of intelligence for almost a year. The strategic gains had already been made, and the information gleaned had proved invaluable. The operational cost of discovery, while high in terms of propaganda, was seen by many within intelligence circles as a worthwhile trade-off for the intelligence dividend. The ultimate twist, however, would only emerge decades later, long after the Cold War had ended. In 1961, George Blake, the very MI6 officer credited by some as instrumental in the tunnel's conception, was exposed as a Soviet mole. Blake confessed to having informed his Soviet handlers about the tunnel project during its planning stages, possibly as early as 1953. This revelation raised a chilling question. Did the Soviets know about the tunnel from the very beginning? Did they allow the West to build and operate it, perhaps feeding them carefully curated disinformation, or simply observing their capabilities? Declassified documents from the NSA, finally made public in 2011, provided some clarity. They confirmed that the KGB was aware of the tunnel's existence due to Blake's betrayal. However, the documents also indicate that the Soviets chose not to expose it immediately, allowing it to function for a period. Their reasons remain a subject of debate. Perhaps they wanted to learn more about Western tapping techniques, or perhaps they hoped to identify other Western assets by tracking who accessed the intercepted information. Regardless of the full truth behind the timing of its exposure, the Berlin Tunnel became a legendary tale of Cold War espionage. Its discovery marked the end of an audacious chapter, but the information it yielded continued to shape Western strategy for years to come. It served as a stark reminder that in the shadow war, even the ground beneath your feet could hide the most profound secrets, and sometimes the deepest betrayals. The Berlin Tunnel, an incredible feat of clandestine engineering, represents one facet of the Cold War's shadow games, the desperate quest for intelligence. But as the Iron Curtain descended across Europe, another, equally ethically complex and strategically vital operation was unfolding, not underground, but in the moral twilight zone of post-war Europe and across the Atlantic. This was a different kind of secret, a different kind of asset, born from a different, far more devastating conflict, World War II. Operation Paperclip. While the Berlin Tunnel sought to penetrate the minds of adversaries through their communication lines, Paperclip sought to literally transplant minds, the brilliant, albeit morally compromised, minds of German scientists, engineers, and technicians directly into the heart of the burgeoning American military-industrial complex. The Cold War was not just a battle of ideologies, it was a race for technological supremacy. As the Allied powers pushed into Germany in the final days of World War II, they discovered not only the remnants of the Third Reich's horrific ideology, but also the staggering scientific and technological advancements it had fostered. Germany had led the world in rocket science, jet propulsion, aerodynamics, optics, and chemical warfare. These were the keys to future military dominance, and both the Soviets and the Western Allies understood their profound significance. The race to secure these spoils of war, the blueprints, the prototypes, and most critically the brains behind them, became a frantic, often brutal scramble. Operation Paperclip was America's answer to this strategic imperative. Launched initially as Operation Overcast in 1945 and then officially renamed Paperclip in late 1946, its objective was clear: to recruit, extract, and integrate over 1,600 German scientists and their families into the United States.
The explicit purpose was to deny their expertise to the Soviet Union and to leverage their knowledge for America's own post-war military research and, initially, against the ongoing war effort in Japan. The moral dilemma, however, was immense. Many of these scientists, particularly those involved in rocketry and aviation, had been integral to the Nazi war machine. Some were documented members of the Nazi Party, others had ties to forced labor, and some had benefited directly from the horrific crimes of the regime. The ethical tightrope walked by American intelligence and military officials was unprecedented. How could a nation that had just fought a war against fascism, a war that sought to uphold democratic values, now embrace and import individuals who had been complicit in the very atrocities they had fought to defeat? The answer lay in the Cold War's escalating paranoia. The threat of Soviet expansion, the specter of another global conflict, overshadowed moral qualms. The rationale became brutally pragmatic. Better to have these brilliant, if tainted minds working for the United States than for its new ideological adversary. From the shadowy depths of a Berlin tunnel to the morally ambiguous recruitment of former enemies, the Cold War consistently forced nations to make choices that would forever haunt their histories. Operation Paperclip was perhaps the most profound example of this moral compromise, a decision that would reshape America's technological future, even as it cast a long, uncomfortable shadow over its ethical past. With the urgent mandate of Operation Paperclip, a clandestine and often ethically fraught recruitment drive swept across post-war Germany. As Allied forces advanced, teams of American intelligence officers, specifically from the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, GOA, were tasked with identifying, interrogating, and ultimately securing Germany's top scientific minds. This wasn't a standard immigration process, it was a race against time, a desperate snatch and grab before the Soviets could claim their share. The initial targets were the masterminds behind Hitler's vengeance weapons, particularly the V-2 rocket program. Scientists like Wernher von Braun, whose brilliance had propelled the V-2 and later America's space program, were among the first to be identified. But the scope quickly expanded to include experts in aerodynamics, jet propulsion, chemical weapons, rocketry, medicine, and even high-state photography. These were the intellectual jewels of the Third Reich, and the United States was determined to possess them. The process was cloaked in layers of secrecy. The scientists were initially held in detention centers where they underwent extensive interrogation, ostensibly for intelligence gathering, but also to assess their suitability for recruitment. The U.S. military quickly recognized that simply denying these scientists to the Soviets wasn't enough. They needed their active participation. However, a major hurdle stood in the way: U.S. law. Specifically, President Truman's directive that no individuals with Nazi party affiliations or sympathies should be admitted into the United States. This presented a significant ethical and legal quagmire, as many of Germany's leading scientists had at some point joined the Nazi Party, often out of opportunism or necessity rather than ardent conviction. The solution was a deliberate, systematic whitewashing of their pasts. The GOA actively altered or expunged incriminating evidence from the scientists' files. Derogatory information regarding Nazi affiliations, SS membership, or involvement in slave labor camps, such as those at Mittelwerk, where V-2s were built using concentration camp prisoners, was suppressed or minimized. Intelligence officials argued that the strategic value of these scientists outweighed any moral or legal objections. It was a stark example of national security being prioritized above ethical purity. Once cleared, often through dubious means, the scientists and their families were secretly transported to the United States. They arrived not as immigrants, but as special employees, often housed on military bases like Fort Bliss, Texas, or Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico, where they continued their research under the watchful eye of the American military. Their presence was largely kept secret from the American public, a necessary deception to avoid public outcry and congressional scrutiny. The goal was to integrate them smoothly, leverage their expertise, and ensure they never fell into Soviet hands. While the U.S. justified Paperclip as a necessary measure to win the Cold War, the Soviets conducted their own similarly aggressive recruitment drives, notably Operation Osoaviakhim, which forcibly relocated thousands of German scientists and engineers to the Soviet Union. This fierce competition underscored the desperate scramble for scientific dominance, painting a chilling picture of how readily moral boundaries could be blurred in the name of national interest. Operation Paperclip was not merely about acquiring blueprints, it was about acquiring human capital, regardless of the ethical cost, to ensure America's technological supremacy in the unfolding global ideological struggle. The seeds of a complex legacy were being sown, ones that would yield both incredible advancements and enduring moral questions.
The arrival of Operation Paperclip scientists in the United States marked a pivotal moment in the nation's scientific and technological trajectory. Their impact was profound, undeniably shaping the course of American innovation and security for decades. At the forefront was Wernher von Braun and his team, who laid the bedrock for the American space program. Their expertise in ballistic missiles, derived from the V-2 program, was directly transferred to the development of early American rockets like the Redstone and Jupiter C. These rockets were not just instruments of war, they became the launch vehicles for America's first satellites and astronauts, fundamentally igniting and fueling the space race. Von Braun's leadership at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center was instrumental in developing the Saturn V rocket, the colossal engine that propelled humanity to the moon. Beyond rocketry, paperclip scientists contributed to a vast array of fields. Experts in aerodynamics and jet propulsion advanced America's Air Force capabilities, leading to faster, more sophisticated aircraft. Optical engineers helped refine cameras and targeting systems, while chemists contributed to crucial advancements in fuels, materials science, and, controversially, even chemical weapons. Medical researchers, some with unsettling pasts, were integrated into military research programs, pushing boundaries in areas like aerospace medicine and biological warfare defense. The contributions were undeniable. America leaped forward technologically, securing a critical advantage in the Cold War's arms race and ultimately winning the space race. The foresight, however morally compromised, of securing these mines paid dividends that reshaped the modern world. Yet, the legacy of Operation Paperclip remains deeply controversial, a stark reminder of the ethical compromises made in the crucible of national security. For decades, the true extent of the scientists' pasts was largely suppressed, their Nazi affiliations downplayed or outright hidden from the American public. This created an uncomfortable duality: public heroes, celebrated for their scientific prowess, whose personal histories were shrouded in secrecy. As declassified documents and investigative journalism slowly brought the truth to light, the ethical questions intensified. How could a democratic nation reconcile its values with the active recruitment and protection of individuals who had participated or benefited from a regime responsible for unimaginable atrocities? Jewish organizations, human rights advocates, and even some members of Congress voiced strong objections. They argued that moral principles were sacrificed at the altar of strategic expediency, sending a dangerous message about accountability for war crimes. The families of concentration camp victims whose suffering had directly or indirectly funded or facilitated some of these scientific advancements found little solace in America's technological triumph. The argument for paperclip often cited the lesser of two evils, better them working for us than for the Soviets. But this justification did little to ease the moral burden. The operation underscored a brutal truth of the Cold War. In the desperate struggle for dominance, the lines between right and wrong became dangerously blurred, and the pursuit of power often eclipsed the demands of justice. The impact of Operation Paperclip is a complex tapestry, threads of groundbreaking innovation woven with the dark fibers of moral ambiguity. It represents a critical chapter in the Cold War, demonstrating that victory often came at a profound ethical cost, leaving behind a legacy that continues to provoke debate and challenge our understanding of integrity and necessity. The Berlin Tunnel, Operation Regal, and Operation Paperclip stand as stark, compelling testaments to the Cold War's unique brand of warfare, a relentless, often unseen struggle fought with intelligence, technology, and profound moral compromises. These were not battles waged on open fields, but in the labyrinthine corridors of power, beneath the very ground we walk, and within the ethical twilight zones of human decision-making. These were not battles waged on open fields, but in the labyrinthine corridors of power, beneath the very ground we walk, and within the ethical twilight zones of human decision-making.
The Berlin Tunnel was a physical manifestation of the ideological divide, a daring gamble in the desperate quest for raw intelligence. It epitomized the audacious lengths to which nations would go to gain an informational edge, burrowing literally under the feet of their adversaries, risking international incident for the chance to listen in on their most private thoughts. It was a mission born of necessity, executed with brilliant engineering, and ultimately exposed with a mix of betrayal and strategic calculation, leaving behind a legacy of both triumph and propaganda. Operation Paperclip, on the other hand, was a different kind of excavation. It was a digging into the human psyche, a calculated decision to embrace the tainted genius of former enemies in the fervent pursuit of technological superiority. It asked the uncomfortable question, at what point does strategic advantage outweigh moral rectitude? The recruitment of over 1,600 German scientists, some with undeniable links to the Nazi regime, propelled America into a new era of scientific achievement, from the moon landings to advanced military capabilities. Yet it left an indelible stain on the nation's ethical fabric, a lingering debate about the price of progress and the accountability for past atrocities. Together, these two operations illuminate the central paradox of the Cold War, a global struggle for freedom and democracy that often demanded the suspension of those very ideals. Both operations were shrouded in secrecy, their true scope and ethical complexities hidden from the public for decades. The declassification of documents from agencies like the NSA has allowed us to finally glimpse the full picture, revealing not just the mechanics of espionage and scientific transfer, but the profound human stories of daring, deceit, and difficult choices made in the deepest shadows of power. The Cold War may have ended, the Berlin Wall may have fallen, and the Iron Curtain may have rusted away. But the shadows cast by operations like REGAL and Paperclip continue to lengthen. They force us to confront uncomfortable questions. What are the true costs of national security? Where do we draw the line when survival or dominance is perceived to be at stake? Can moral integrity coexist with the ruthless demands of geopolitics? The legacy of these operations is not merely a historical footnote, it is a cautionary tale for the present and the future. In a world still grappling with geopolitical tensions, technological races, and the ever-present threat of conflict, the lessons from the Berlin Tunnel and Operation Paperclip resonate with chilling clarity. They remind us that the most significant battles are often fought not with grand armies, but with hidden tunnels, recruited minds, and the quiet, often agonizing decisions made in the deepest shadows of power. The secrets unearthed from these periods continue to challenge our understanding of history, forcing us to ask, what other truths still lie buried, waiting to be revealed?